It never happened. All right, everybody. So 6.85 has arrived. The gameplay update. I know probably a lot of people were expecting a bit more, but unfortunately, or fortunately, for those of you that did enjoy the last patch, we have 6.85 here, which didn't change the game a whole lot, but still changed it just enough for people to, I think, enjoy the game a bit more until we get 6.86 right after the fall major. So we'll go over that here in a bit. And I know probably you're wondering why, you would watch this video over, anybody else's 6.85 impressions. And I think I'm not the most analytical mind when it comes to Dota. I don't have the highest MMR, but I want to talk about the game in this patch in particular as it pertains to somebody in the 6.85, or rather the 4K MMR threshold and lower. So we'll go over a couple of things quickly, and if it becomes clear that I'm talking out my ass and I don't have anything to really say about something in particular, I might just stop and I might just say that's, it's good, but maybe let's not do this. Anyways, let's get started. Like I said, not the most brilliant analytical mind in the world, but I do think I have at least a little bit of knowledge when it comes to Dota, and I'd like to talk about how and what I've seen when I've played 6.85 so far. I've only played a handful of games, so I don't have the biggest sample size in the world, but from what I've seen, there are some things out there that are interesting, and I think you should definitely check out as well. So let's get started with general stuff. Purge no longer deals damage to bonus damage to summon units, which I think is an unusual change that I'm not sure why it's necessary, but there it is. I guess it makes it better for Warlock and among other things, but it's still strange to see. Siege Creep now doesn't have magic resistance, or magic immunity rather, and it is 80% magic resistance. This doesn't really change much. Yeah, you'll see the occasional doomed Siege Creep from here on out. You'll see the occasional, maybe somebody jumps on with a Storm Spirit and he tries to pull somebody instead pulls the Siege Creep. It really doesn't help nuking down the Siege Creep with 80% magic resistance, so it's not super great. Doesn't really matter that much. Ancient Thunderhide and the Ancient Black Dragon now are somewhat okay if you're a Chen and you have an Aghanim Scepter, or if you're a Lifestealer with an Aghanim Scepter, so I guess that's fine too. I wouldn't see why you. I guess the plus 15 attack and 15% attack damage is really good for Chen, but the Ancient Black Dragon, I mean, 2 armor is, it's stackable, but 2 armor at the end of the game is not that much. I mean, it's something. You get an Ancient Black Dragon, Black Drake rather, with Chen because there's no other options, and sure, it's fine. And if you get another one with an X-Spawn, or you get like an Ancient Black Drake and then an Ancient Thunderhide, then an Ancient Black Drake, I'm sure you're fine with it. It's not a big deal. So there's that. Following passives not being disabled by break. This is pretty good. Whenever there's a Lifestealer in the game, I think, or not a Lifestealer, rather a Viper, you could go for Silver Edge, but I don't really see it being necessary. I mean, these are just things that should have been disabled by break anyways. So let's get to the heroes, which is the real meat of the patch. From what I've seen, I haven't really seen much of Baden, and he's not really a 4K hero to begin with. I mean, generally, if people pick a Baden in this range, it's either because they random them or they specialize in this hero for whatever reason, which is very odd. There's very rare instances where you see a team composition and there's like a Mirana on the other team, and you're like, this is a really good time to pick a Baden. Let me pick a Baden real quick. That just doesn't happen in our range, in the 4K and below range. It just doesn't happen that much. Borrow Time, Aghanim Scepter, Redirection. I don't see many people be building Ags. Maybe it's better. You might have that occasional one or two people that builds Aghanim Scepters and somehow it wins you the game, and maybe it's great. Who knows? I don't think that's not that big of a change even to be warranted to build the Aghanim Scepter. I think Aghanim Scepter is still not the best item on that hero to begin with, but whatever. Like I'm saying, you just don't see many Abaddons in 4K. I might be wrong about that, but you just don't see it really. Alchemist, Acid Spray, damage increased. This is okay. I mean, it doesn't make Alchemist a hard carry again, and the Grievel's Greed Bounty Rune increase doesn't make him a hard carry again, but he does. If you do want to put him maybe in the off lane, put him mid, try to go for like an early mech, maybe build some people some Aghanim Scepters, it definitely makes it a little bit easier to do so. You can farm a bit faster with Acid Spray now, do a little bit more damage, but He's still not the carry that he used to be back at TI3. And, yeah, I mean, he's a tier 2 hero to me still. And if you get good at him, you can maybe play him. But, yeah, let's move on. Ancient Apparition, Cold Feet cast range increased from 700 to 700 to 900,000. This is pretty good for pubs because I think a lot of people underrate the value of Ice Vortex and they generally don't get it early on. I don't like to put too many points into Cold Feet, and I think there's a divide in putting in Cold Feet among other spells, but this is definitely going to make it better to actually put the skill. Like, this is a good reason to put put the skill in. Obviously, Cold Feet still isn't going to freeze people extraordinarily quickly, but it's not a bad thing. It gives them a nice little buff. AM, blink distance rescaled to about, 75 less? And then at its max level, it's still the same as it was. So yeah, I mean, this changes pretty much nothing. If you're an AM picker, which there are a lot of in 4K, actually, surprisingly enough, Mana Void restructure and blink restructure are not going to affect you. These numbers are not enough for him to be not a top tier hero if you can get the farm. AM is still very good. But if you're picking AM in 4K, you need to get that. Unless you're dying consistently and your supports are not, pulling, or supports are not making room for you, supports are not harassing your lane opponent, you need to get the Treads Battle Fury at 15 to 20 minute mark. And in between that time, if you get it later, it's going to be tough. You have to be able to CS with this hero in that range, and this is going to it's going to hamper your ability to get out early levels. Level 1 in particular, you're not going to be able to blink as far, but it's not that great. I mean, it doesn't change that much, and it's still a good hero. Just learn how to CS. All right, now on to Bane and Feeble cooldown reduced by 2. Brain Sap, mana cost rescaled. This is very good. If you're a support, this just gives you another hero to play. Because Brain Sap, mana cost reduction, mana cost was a big issue with Bane early on in the game. And reducing it by 30 is, I think, very important at level 1. So if you want to play this hero now, you don't have to worry about mana cost as much. Maybe get an early stick, and you'll be able to do a bit more in lane, I think. Fix Fiend's Grip, sometimes not granting True Sight, so that's just a bug fix. That's nice. And Enfeeble is, I mean, it's not something you're spamming on anyways, unless you're mid or against a heavy right clicker, or you're like doing an aggro tri-lane or an aggro dual lane or something like that, or you're in the offlane somehow. But it's definitely a good Bane buff. I don't think he's better than some of the other top tier supports right now. I don't even think he's better than Bounty Hunter in certain instances, but I do think he's a good support still. Tier 2 support, in my opinion. In our range. Batrider, I don't see a lot of Batrider picks in our range either, but the Aghanim Scepter buff is definitely very interesting. And I've seen people build it before already in my games, that it seems to have worked out. We used to see this thing, and I am going to go off on a tangent here about Pro Dota. And we used to see this thing with Demon where and especially in FPL and NEL, he would build Blink, he would build Force Staff. I think he might have built Boots of Travel, and then he would build like either Mask Madness and something else, or just straight into a Refresher Orb. And I think Refresher Orb on Batrider is very good, or was very good, but it's a lot of money to invest in not much utility. But now you have an Aghanim Scepter, which gives you great stats, and it gives you the utility of having to be able to lasso, 2 people in close proximity. And especially in our bracket, people are very clumped together. There's a lot of people that are standing next to each other, and that makes lassoing generally it makes it easier, and it makes it easier for you to grab people and kill them. It also helps that you have 2 choices for your team to go on. If you grab one person, maybe the carries in the other person, you could ping one, tell them focus this one down. The other stuff, flame break damage over time reduced, whatever, who cares. Flame break damage duration increased, so I mean it's a bit of a side nerf, if anything. Bloodseeker has been nerfed horrendously. Thirst scaling changed from 100% to 25% to 75% to 25%, so 100% not there anymore. I mean, he's still very strong, don't get me wrong. The blood rage heal reduction makes it kind of harder for him to jungle. I don't even know if he can still. I'm not sure. But he is still effective. I mean, if you get some farm on him, he's still just as good as he was. Well, obviously he's not, but he's still pretty good. At the max level, blood rage heal is still the same. So if you're laning him, it's fine. You don't really need to worry about the heal that much. It's really just this thing that's kind of an issue. And how much is this thirst actually going to affect him? It's only 25% nerf, so I think he's still probably pretty good. And I know for a fact that Bounty Hunter is still very strong. I think these nerfs were great, but they're going to have to go even further, I think, in the next patch. At least from a pub mentality, I've seen him wreck in lane still. He's still very... You get an Orb of Venom, you max out your Shuriken Toss, you get 1 point in Janata, you're killing people in lane. And then you're roaming around, you have to constantly have detection. They either need to change something with Shadow Walk, or just make it... or nerf him in some other way, because Bounty Hunter is still strong in our range. You have the track now provides vision only on the target rather than the area surrounding it, which is very good. It means they don't get any vision unless you are literally on top of the other hero or on top of somebody else that's tracked. Track allied bonus gold reduced from 50, 100, 150 to 40, 80, 120. This makes it so the game doesn't get as out of hand when he starts getting track kills. But if you get wrecked in lane, there's not really a chance that you're going to come back in a pub game. It just doesn't happen very often. They either have to throw really hard or you have to have some great late game. And that just seems, it doesn't seem very valuable in a lot of the pub games. If you see a bounty hunter on the other team, you have to make sure you have strong lanes, and you have to be ready to carry detection and have strong support and have TPs ready. Because otherwise bounty's going to ruin your life again. Alright, Brewmaster. Not a lot of brew pickers on our range either. Primal Split, especially because Dispel Magic is not a spell that's often used. Area of effect increased from 200 to 600. Dispel Magic cooldown reduced from 8 to 6. This is probably the biggest one. Hurl Boulder cooldown reduced from 7 to 5. That's pretty good. You don't really have to worry about mana. I don't know how many Hurl Boulders you can get out at its first level. Let me look. Let's see here. Hold on a second. All right, so Primal Split at its first level lasts 15 seconds. So that does mean you can get 3 off, I believe, assuming that when you cast it, you actually, like, I don't know how the duration works exactly, like, because I know there's a cast point for it, so I don't know when the duration starts. I think you should be able to get 3 off, though, instead of the usual 2 that you could at the first level. So that's kind of interesting. So yeah, Brewmaster did get a little bit of a buff. I don't know if it's, much, but it's something, at the very least. He's still not, a tier 1 hero, but he's still pretty good. He's useful in certain instances. Bristleback passive quill spray damage threshold reduced from 250 to 230. I don't really know how much that affects. Centaur Warrunner, again, another kind of, it's okay, but it's not that great. Max, it increases return by about, 4% each level-ish, roughly, around 4, 5 to 6% each level. Return strength as bonus damage increased. I guess that's pretty good, actually. It's not bad. Chaos Knight, here's a big one. Now lowers the target's armor by 5 for 8 seconds, whatever it crits, so it gives you kind of like a Desolator-ish thing. So what it does is that it provides the damage or the armor reduction before you actually hit the target, so that the first hit does have some armor reduction applied to it. It also gives you critical damage reduced by about 25%. But this is fine because after armor reduction, I mean, you're going to get hit about the same or more anyways. So, it sucks that they had to reduce the critical damage, but this is for a good reason. So if you are a CK picker, which I think is actually a decent hero, it's not too hard to play. He has a decent stun in lane. I think this is a fine buff. It definitely makes him more playable, but he still does have some mana issues in lane. He can't flash farm. He needs BKB. So there are still some issues with Chaos Knight, but he's definitely still an okay hero. I would pick him occasionally if it warrants it. If there's an IO on your team that actually knows how to play him, again, that doesn't happen very often in our range. But if that's the case, Chaos Knight might not be a bad option. Chen, Penance slow damage amplification increased from 14 blah 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 to, I think it got increased by 1 to 2 each level, although it was rescaled. No, 1 to 2 to 3 each level, which is max 30% damage amplification and slow. So not bad. Test of Faith damage mana cost reduced by a lot, which is really nice. And then Test of Faith damage cooldown has been reduced as well. I mean, there's not a lot of people that play Chen in our range, but if you do play him, please rotate to lane more, because if you have the mana for it, and you should now with the mana reduction, you could kill people with Test of Faith, I think, and Penance. That's kind of the build that you could use. If you want to focus less on jungling and more on lane ganking, I don't know how viable that is, but it's something you could try. Clinks has been buffed, and he's already pretty good. Strafe cooldown reduced. This is a pub stomper, and he should continue to be one, especially with this buff. Doesn't affect him that much, but it's still pretty good. Crystal Maiden continues to be a good support, with Crystal Nova cooldown reduced from 15 to 13, still viable. Darkster's base intelligence is reduced by 2. I don't know how much this actually affects him. Maybe people might have to buy a null tally early on, but I think that actually might be useless anyways. It's really not that big of a deal considering you're getting a soul ring anyways, so it's not like you're not going to have the mana for stuff. Maybe early on you can't get as many ion shells off, but you get that soul ring at a decent timing and you should be fine. Poison touch mana cost reduced to 100. Dazzle was always a good support, and now he's even better, so that's nice. I don't know if poison touch was. It's a lot of different builds for Dazzle, so but most people will get poison touch. I think most people in our range. Death Prophet, Exorcism, Spirits increased except for at its max level. That's pretty good. I think this actually could be, if you go for an early game lineup or if your team wants to push early, Death Prophet could be okay. I really wish with Disruptor they changed some mana costs around, or they maybe gave him a bit of intelligence gain, or they gave his base intelligence a bit more. But this is a pretty good buff. This kind of sucks. Only vision over the target itself is kind of annoying. But this is pretty good. He's not my go-to support unless you're playing against heroes that need to get silenced, but Scorched Earth damage heal increased from 12 blah blah to it's increased at its max level by 18, which is pretty good. Scorched Earth is already being leveled up first anyways, so this I think is actually really strong. But he's still, from the last changes, I don't know how good he is in the jungle. And the problem with Doom is that if he's not that great in the jungle, then where is he great exactly? He's not really good in the safe lane. You'd rather have other heroes in the safe lane. Mid, he's sometimes okay, but even still, he's not that great with all the heroes that are there now. And off lane, that's probably where he's at his best. I think in most instances, a lot of people will pick him in the jungle if you're in a pub game, although I think that time has passed. But I think offlane might be the place to go. DK is still not great, but this helps him a little bit. 11 seconds instead of 8. Raw Ranger, Precision Aura, they made her, it's only 2% at its max level, but this is still pretty nice. Only 2% increase. That's still a decent chunk of damage going your way. A couple extra damage, bit of damage there. And the cooldown's reduced, so Ra's still a pretty good hero. She's just feel like one of those heroes that in pub games can be a pub stomper if you play her the right way. Get an early Mask of Madness. Maybe your team gets a medallion or something, and you could do Roche a little bit earlier because you have a lot of damage. And because Frost Heroes too makes it really good for snowballing and getting Roche, like I said earlier, getting early Aegis. And again, very good early game hero, but the game goes long enough and you have to be careful. I played Earthshaker. This changes really nothing. Nothing at all. You put him in the off lane, get Soul Ring, get Tranquils, and you're still just as dominant as you were before. It's just sometimes you get those really. I had a situation where there was a storm support on the other team, believe it or not, and he was getting very low, and I fissured him. And in any other patch, it would have killed him. But the one I had was I had level 2 or 3, I think, and I just couldn't bring him down because he had 15 HP maybe at the end, and that's the difference right there. So you might miss a kill or two with Fissure, but it changes really nothing. It's almost negligible, except for that instance. Earth Spirit is another hero, again, that you won't see very often in our pubs, but you will see him occasionally. And if you are an Earth Spirit picker, then you're completely fine with this change. In fact, you love this. Next patch, they may take another look at Earth Spirit and say, okay, he's fine now, or okay, we need to nerf him a bit more before we put him into captain's mode. But if you're a pub player and you're an Earth Spirit player like Callow Guy is, you're fine with this. This is great. All right, Elder Titan, Echo Stomp area of effect increased from 475 to 500. 25 range is not that much. Mana cost has been rescaled so that it's good early on. You know, the mana doesn't, it doesn't cost too much mana early on into the game, which is fine. Attack damage per creep has been increased by about 3, and this is actually a lot. This is per creep, so you get a creep wave. You get a lot of damage at, 4th level. I think this is, the old staple gun is back. Well, it's sort of back. You don't get that much damage, but you get a decent bit. Natural aura sticky duration increased from 0.5 to 1.0. I don't know what this means. So, whatever. Enchantress can now be built more like a carry. You want Desolator, you want Scotty probably being the main thing. Then go for it. And then H's Tendency Heal is a bit better now, too. Enigma's Midnight Pulse cast time reduced, but the area of effect has also been reduced. So, bit of a side nerf, and then Black Hole range increased by 20. Still good jungler. Still good early on, and still good in pubs. Pick him. Good hero. Gyrocopter, Rocket Barrage, damage reduced by very little. This is not that big of a reduction. I mean, I guess it is 30 damage maximum at its first level, and then at its last level, it's still 30 damage. That's still, like, you max out Rocket Barrage. You're like level 7 or something, I think. Yeah, you're like level 7. Still get 660 damage yet. 7th level is pretty nice. Call down slow, no longer pierce the spell immunity. That's probably how it should be. Alright, thank you, Baku07. So, yeah. Elder Titan's buff means how much time an enemy keeps the debuff of ET's aura when he moves out of range. So it gives it a bit more time. Instead of half a second, it's a full second. So. Huskar Berserkers Blood Magic resistance per stack reduced from 4, 5, 6, 7 to 3, 4, 5, 6. Which is a bit of a nerf. And he's kind of a pub stomper, so I can understand this. I don't know if it was necessary. Invoker is still not that great of a mid-laner, but this does help him a little bit. Intelligence growth increased to 4.0, which is nice. You get a bit extra damage early on in the game if you want to go Quas Wex or even Quas Exhort. Alacrity speed damage bonus increased, so 2080 to 3090. So you can go Alacrity. You could go the Exhort Wex build and try that out and see how that works for you, because right-clicking Invoker is a thing, and Alacrity, that definitely helps you right-click. Aghanim Scepter now adds on 1 level of stats provided by Quas Wex and Exhort and invoked in all spells. That's pretty big. You can get Ags a little bit earlier now, and I think that's great. And max level Deafening Blast now retains its normal locating targeting UI. Moving on, Jakiro Dual Breath's Fiery Wave now moves at the same speed as its Icy Wave, which is fine. Just a bit of a buff. Dual Breath damage increased. Ice Path range increased. They really nerfed Jakiro a long while ago with Ice Path, but and Liquid Fire as well. So he's a shadow of his former self, but he still finds support here and there. Blade Fury damage increased. Juggernaut's still a good carry, even after the nerfs from the last patch. Keeper of the Light Chakra Magic spell cooldown reduction increased 1, 2, 3, 4 to 2, 3, 4, 5. So what this means actually is that if you have an Aghanim Scepter, I believe, you can get 2 blasts off in quick succession with using Chakra Magic. Throw a blast off. I think you chakra yourself, you throw another one off. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure how it works, but Dakota was telling me that when we were playing a game the other day. Kunkka's Tidebringer damage increased from to 65 at its max level. X marks the spot cast range rescaled. X marks the spot cooldown reduced. And Ghost Ship cast point reduced. This damage from Tidebringer will add up over the course of a laning phase. But is it that useful? Is it going to be that big of a change? I think the Ghost Ship cast point is actually a big deal, but I don't know if Kunkka is back to where he used to be. I don't know if he'll ever be back there. I haven't really seen a Kunkka in any of my pubs in a long time. A long time. It's very strange. Legion got buffed. Hardcore. Base damage increased by 4, overwhelming odds, cooldown reduced. Press the attack, cast time reduced. And fix Legion Commander sometimes auto-attacking nearby units after duel, and instead of continuing to attack the dual target. So she got buffed a lot. I played her the other night, and I got wrecked because I'm not a Legion player. I haven't played her very often, and I get destroyed. But she's good now, and I would suggest picking her. You could jungle with her if you like. I wouldn't, it's not the best thing because you're not rotating to lane very often, and even if you are, you have to have some sort of setup. You're not going to walk in and duel somebody. So you have to, if you're going to jungle her, you just be very mindful of what's happening in the game. If you're going to offlane her, then go overwhelming odds, and you can crush actually the enemy offlaner. You just have to be careful. Shrek has been nerfed into oblivion in the early game, and I don't really have to talk much about this because I think everybody knows what happened to him and knew what was going to happen to him. But if you do want to pick Shrek, he's still a good support if you do want to pick him there. Or if you do want to pick him as a core, specifically mid, you won't be able to dominate as much, obviously. The Null Talisman is not going to get you as much damage as you used to. The Lightning Storm is not going to do as much damage. It'll still do a decent amount of damage, but you're not going to crush the laning phase like you could. Like, there'd be instances where you could kind of just keep your eyes closed and crush the laning phase without any issue whatsoever. And that just doesn't even be the case anymore. But if you get to the late game, you still have Pulse Nova, you still have Edict, and you still have Octarine Core. So there's a lot of work you could do with this hero if you get later on to the game. This is a good nerf, but is it enough? I mean, most people in 4K kind of thrive on the laning phase, and if that does get nerfed, rather, then it's going to be tough on you. Whereas, maybe a little bit higher up, and especially the pro players, and I've already seen RT crush in the late game with this hero. Maybe it sucks early on, but later on into the game, you could still do great work with it. Lich now, Sacrifice no longer splits XP, which is fantastic. That's very good against offlaners. Shaded Frost projectile speed increase, and the attack speed slow is good. I don't know if I would pick Lich over other heroes because he has a lack of lockdown. His ult is still not that great. And he has an armor, and his other spell is Sacrifice, so it's not amazing. It's a good laning phase hero, but he, apart from that, doesn't really accomplish much in game. You're kind of a walking ward at that point. Forget Lifestealer, who cares? Nobody really picks him anyways. Rage cooldown from 19 to 16. Okay, you can theoretically Rage, BKB, then Rage if you wanted to, but who cares? Lena, Life Strike array damage reduced. I don't really think this is that much. She could definitely still be played as a support. I've seen people play her as a support and have great luck with her and have a really great time with her. Laguna Blade damage is only decreased by 100 at its max level, and it's still the same at its first, and almost the same at its second level too. So, still think it's a great hero. Very good. This change really does nothing, and it should have been like that from the get-go, so we'll not talk about that. I don't really know much about Lone Druid, so I'm going to skip over him. I would assume this is a very good buff to Battlecry, and it makes him a bit stronger in the early game, but what do I know? Luna's strength gain increase is very solid. She needed a little bit more meat on her in the early game, and this allows you to go for that greedier build, Helm the Dominator treads straight into like a Yasha. Treads Aquila, Wand, Helm the Dominator right into a Yasha, and then get a BKB after. And you can even I wouldn't go into Manta style before your BKB. I would always get the BKB, but this makes it safer to do that build. The Yasha first was already pretty solid after the Helm the Dominator. That was already something some people did. But this makes it so it's even better now because you have some extra strength to work with. It's not much, but it's a little bit. Eclipse cooldown reduced, and a lot of people have been talking about the Eclipse Aghanim Scepter beam count being increased by a shit ton at its max level. But at that point, people should have BKBs even in this range, and if they don't, then maybe you could get away with it. However, it'd be kind of cool to see like Luna as a non-carry hero, but yeah, maybe she could be a good support. I don't know. She's fine, I guess. That's kind of cool. But this is it's an interesting change. I don't know how much it's still kind of iffy to me. These changes aren't enough, I think. And, he's still not a great jungler. It's going to take him a while. This is better in the safe lane. And he still has the issue of, he has to transform into his wolf form. And that does take time, and you get locked down at that point and killed. Magnus and power cooldown reduced. This is a really good buff. You have the mana to spam out and power later on down the road. And boy, you're going to be having empower pretty much on every hero during a team fight, or close to it. Medusa, Mystic Snake damage, and mana steel boost per jump increased from 25 to 35%. Not that big of a change. Miranda's agility growth from 2.75 to 3.3 is actually pretty nice. I don't know how viable it makes her in the late game, and I think that's the biggest issue with Mirana is that, first of all, it takes her forever to get to that late game status. And if she does get there, how actually strong is she? She still needs a Maelstrom, Manta Style, a couple other items as well. You can build her kind of a couple of different ways, but I think Maelstrom and Mjolnir are definitely 100% needed. Starstorm Secondary Strike. This is a change that needed to be added a while ago. They needed to make Starstorm a bit bigger on the secondary strike radius, and I'm glad they did. Agility growth increased from 3 to 3.4 on Morphling. Adaptive strike damage has been rescaled, so that's actually very strong in the earlier levels. So you hit that like level like 9, 10, 12 area, and his adaptive strike is actually, you can come to fights a bit earlier now because of that. You'll have the damage with the adaptive strike to work with. I mean, you could already fight pretty early on with a Morphling anyways. That's kind of where we don't see him that much, but he does take a while to get online. He kind of has the same issue with Mirana, where he doesn't farm as fast, and so you get like a Lincoln Sphere, and then you have a ton of mana regen. You kind of could just waveform a ton of camps and group waves, so something to keep in mind. Nagasama Riptide damage has been rescaled. This doesn't really pertain to many people at our matchmaking range, but this is more towards, I think, support Naga Sirens, because the damage is the same at its max level. And you don't really give a damn, you know, if you're just ripped out on creep waves, it doesn't really affect you that much. But if you're like, if you're an Naga Siren and you're part of a support, you know, tri lane, if you're in a tri lane, defensive or aggressive, it will affect you. That is some damage that you are going to be missing. I've never seen Ag's song, so I don't really care about that. I don't really want to talk about Nature's Prophet either. He got a lot of buffs. Congratulations. You can rat now even further. Don't pick him in my games. I still hate that hero. Necrophos Stealth Pulse damage increased from 75, blah, blah, blah. It's been increased by a lot at its first couple of levels, so it does make him better in lane. Heartstopper Aura no longer affects Ancient Creeps. So if you pick him in my game and you go to the Ancients, I will laugh at you. Especially if you're on my, even if you're on my team. And then say his health and mana regen has been increased. So they made him not as ass, but he's still pretty ass. Night Stalker's base health regen has increased from 0.25 to 2. That's a huge increase. That makes him up there in the base health regens like a Nyx Assassin, for example. So this makes him even more viable in the off lane. So if you'd like to play him off lane, I will not be upset if you do so. I think he's a particularly good hero, and people should pick him more often. Don't put him in, though. Nyx Assassin, Burrow Impale, so if you have Aghanim Scepter, which is a very good item on this hero, has been reduced. And Mana Burn, bonus range increased by 75%. And then Vendetta duration. I think this change in particular might see him jump from that like tier 3, tier 2 kind of support up to that tier 1 support that we might see in competitive games more. And he's certainly going to be more annoying in pub games too, but we'll see. Ogre Magi base armor increased by 1. Nice, you know, make the jokes if you want. Bloodlust attack speed bonus increased. It's pretty nice, actually. That's a lot of attack speed early on in the game. And can now be cast on towers. And fixed multicast Bloodlust not affecting nearby spell immune allies. I'm still not a fan of Ogre. I don't think that he's that great of a support. But he's alright. He's alright. Purification cast port reduced is huge. And Degen Aura Stickiness has been reduced. So you can't quite get away with running at people with Degen Aura as much, but Purification cast point being reduced is really nice. Pretty much the same Omni Knight. And some really good buffs for Oracle. Fortune's and cast time has been pretty much nullified, so it doesn't have one. Cast range has been increased, which is great. Radius has been increased, which is great. Damage has been rescaled so that it does more early on into the game. Although at its max level, it doesn't do that much. But not, I mean, by the time you level up Fortune's End anyways, you know, this is a lot. Usually, I think, I guess you do level this up second. I guess you get Purifying Flames first, then you get 1 point in your W, then you level this up second. So I do guess you're missing out on some decent amount of damage in the mid game, but it's not a huge deal. But the cooldown has been changed so you can spam it as well. 6 at its max level. And I guess this was the biggest change, is that they didn't want to make it too strong in the early game. Because if it was a 6-second cooldown with 300 damage, that'd be ridiculous. And with the no cast point and big range and radius, that'd be a problem. So that's really good. Fate's Edict no longer amplifies incoming non-magical damage. And now has normal purgeability rules. So it does make it a bit simpler to use. and to know when to use it. But it's not that big of a deal, I don't think. It kind of sucks, but Purifying Flames cooldown reduced by 0.25 seconds, which is it's not much. You won't notice it generally, but it's there. Outworld Devourer is still ass, even with 4% of affected heroes' max mana go. It's a nice EMP, it's good, but is it really going to do that much? And mana loss no longer pierces spell immunity. So now, the biggest thing about OD is that heroes buy BKBs and he becomes useless. And that's still the case, and is now even more so the case. So, I mean, he's still ass. He's not a good hero. I mean, he has good matchups mid, but he's not a good hero. Phantom Assassin, Stifling Dagger now applies your attacks on hit effects, meaning like Desolator, Scotty. So, I don't know if the Scotty slow stacks with the Stifling Dagger slow, but if it does, that's awesome. Not a big change, but it's something. Blur no longer has a 0.75 second delay. Interesting. They nerfed PL hard from 3 to 2.6 agility growth, and his doppelganger cast time now actually has cast time instead of being 0. Actually, it's not that hard of a nerf, but it'll be enough. Still a good hero. Sunray max health damage per second. Literally nothing. 1%. At its max level, I guess it's fine, but still, Phoenix is not going to get picked enough for it to be a big deal. Illusory Orb increased speed by 50, which actually is a lot when you think about speed and how much that affects it. Cooldown is reduced by 1 second, and Dream cooldown has been reduced. So, Puck's still probably fine. You could pick Puck, but I don't know if it's that great. This is a big change right here. 27% at all levels, movement slow. Now, if you pick Pudge and you mess up, you still might be able to kill the hero because you have Rot slow at 27% instead of 20%. So, probably not. You're probably going to be asked to miss your hooks anyways. And if you're a Pudge picker, and if you're especially from Peru, not that I have anything against Peruvians, but it just generally seems like Peruvians that pick Pudge seem to have worse times because they're playing on US East servers, which generally have, higher pings for them, and they try to pick Pudge anyway. So don't do that, please. Don't pick Pudge when you have high ping. Is that, I think, the moral of the story that I'm trying to say. Pugna base movement speed increased by 10. Netherward now has a cast range, which is nice, instead of just plopping you right down where you're standing. And life drain damage steal per second increase has been increased by about 25 at its max level. It's okay. Pugna's still fine. Quap is really, this does nothing. The Aghanim Scepter damage is reduced by 25 at its max level, like, not even 25 actually, 20. 20 damage is nothing. It's nothing. Still a good hero, very good hero. Keep picking Queen of Pain, very good hero, very good hero, very good hero. Razor static link now drains damage smoothly over its duration rather than every second. Pretty cool. Necessary change. Ricky, permanent invisibility, health regen. I've played a pub with him. He owned me. So I don't know. That was one game, so sample size is small. Doesn't matter. No one really uses Caustic Finale. It's not that big of a deal. No one picks Shadow Demon. This doesn't really do much. No one picks Shadow Demon. If you pick Shadow Demon, you don't generally spam out Shadow Poison because you're generally not smart, or people generally aren't smart in our range. But if you do pick Shadow Demon, this might be a good buff. Shackles cooldown reduced. Yes. Shackles total damage increased. Yes. 300 max level. Very good. Still very slow hero, still very squishy hero, so you have to be careful with Shadow Shaman, but that is something that you have. Can maybe execute ganks a bit better. This doesn't matter. This really doesn't matter either, but this is pretty cool. Well, actually, it kind of does, but Castle Shot cooldown reduced, so. Tier 1, Tier 2 support, pretty good. Very good. Slaughter's sprint now has phase movement, and his cooldown has been reduced, but so is his duration, so. Slaughter's even stronger than he used to be, and he's still pretty strong already. I've seen Moo play him a lot in the off lane. I think a lot of people are trying it out. Seems to be pretty good. Shrapnel delay reduced. Makes Sniper somewhat, back towards his former self, but not great. Desolate now works on non-hero units if they're alone. Dispersion now reflects damage before reduction returns that as the same damage type. I thought at first this was a nerf, but in talking with other people, they insist that it's probably a buff in certain instances. Can be a nerf in certain other instances, but I don't really know. I mean, this is fine, I guess, but RIP 17%, pseudo-random chance. No more getting 2 bashes in a row. It's pseudo-random chance kind of sucks. I think there's a way to nerf Spirit Breaker, and this was not it. Storm Spirit, nerfed heavily in lane, and even out of lane, too. he's still a Storm Spirit, and Storm Spirit will always be a good hero because of what abilities he has, but they made it a lot harder for you to succeed early on in the game. Mana cost for Remnant increased to 100. It's very hard before you get your bottle, and even if you have your bottle, that's not as many Remnants in lane, so you won't be able to spam out your Overload as much, therefore you won't be able to harass down the enemy mid as easily. Kind of sucks. Unobstructed Vision has been changed by about 200, which is big, so nighttime vision, not going to be as good, sadly. I mean, for a lot of people, if you're, a lot of people here aren't Storm Pickers, and you have to play against a lot of Storm Pickers. So I know, I'm glad that this is happening. I do play Storm occasionally, but this is the biggest thing to me is it's been increased from 15 plus 7% to 30 plus 8%. That's a giant increase in mana cost, man. That's a huge increase, I think, especially in the early game. So it sucks that for me at the very least, I haven't played around with him, so I don't know how bad it is. But from what I've heard from other Storm players, it's actually not that bad. So who knows? Sven, base intelligence increased by 2. Allows you to get maybe a couple more, depending on what your starting items are, it allows you to get maybe a couple more Storm Hammers off in lane. Maybe makes a little bit of a Sven support more viable. Great cleave damage increased, so later on into the game, actually not even later on because your max level is 66%, it makes Great Cleave a little bit more viable early game, but not much. Doesn't really change much. Techies has been nerfed into oblivion, that's all you really need to know. I'm not going to go through all these things. If you want to read about Techies, and the changes, you can if you want, but thank God Techies has been nerfed the fuck out of. Terrorblade's been buffed the fuck out of. They even removed him from CM just because, like, okay, we don't know how this is going to work, but what Reflection now does is pretty much you hit it, and if there's anybody in the area close to you, 900 area, by the way, which is pretty big, they're getting reflected. And that's a pretty, 25% slow is not as much as it used to be, but still pretty good. Cooldown has been rescaled so that it's a bit longer. This stuff is whatever. It's not a big deal. Metamorphosis now emits a 900 range aura that affects his nearby illusions. This is actually huge. It's a very big change. So it makes Terrorblade a bit better. Because you have 2 illusions already out. And you pop off your Sunder. Or rather, not your Sunder, your Metamorphosis. Boom. Those illusions immediately go to Metamorphosis. And then you cast another illusion and boom. You got, close to sometimes 3 illusions with Metamorphosis going, and you're taking that tower down like that, man. You're taking heroes down like that. So you get right to it. Sunder cast range increased. Sunder minimum health increased from 20 to 25. That's pretty good. It's not a huge deal. This does 1 armor. It's not gonna change the world, but at least it makes T100 more viable. And same can be said for this. This is actually pretty good. Rolling Death cooldown reduced from 8 to 6. You might be able to get those early kills, in that off lane if you get lucky. Have that extra 2 seconds to work with. Rearm channel time reduced at its last 2 levels. Pretty interesting, actually. I don't know how this is going to affect Tinker players. It might make it more viable. For Tinker, and that might not seem like a huge change, but those extra, half seconds, those extra 0.25 seconds might be enough to do stuff with. But Tiny's inherently stronger. His base strength has been increased from 24 to 26, and more importantly, his base intelligence has been increased from 14 to 17, so you can get your combo off twice, I think, without having to buy a circlet, I believe. If you're going to go mid, you can do double tank or double GG branch and have 2 pooled tangos and get a bottle, and you'd still be able to get off your combo, I think, if you want. I'm not 100% sure on that. Don't quote me, but that might be the case. Treant Leech mana cost reduced. Quality of life support buff, as are a lot of these buffs, honestly, for supports. Fervor is good. Troll might be a little more viable. He did get nerfed into Oblivion, but might be okay. Tusk has been nerfed, but it's not that bad. It really isn't that bad. Still a good hero, man. He's still a very good hero. None of these changes scream to me don't pick Tusk anymore. He's still going to be picked, especially in pro games. They did nerf the heck out of Undying, especially if you're in, if you're against supports that are ranged supports and ranged carries. If you're in a tri-lane against 3 ranged heroes, Tombstone is almost useless at its first levels, and pretty much any levels, really. It'll die instantly at level 1. Every support or every hero in that lane will hit the Tombstone and it'll die. Worthless at level 1. Almost worthless at level 2 too. Level 4 is fine, and 7 hits is fine. I still think you max Tombstone first in almost any lane. But, and they reduced the zombie damage. I don't know why they thought, you know, nerfing Undying was a good idea. He wasn't that much of a game. I mean, he probably had a good win rate, I'm sure, but I don't think he was that big of a game winner. Aghanim Scepter now increases the decay strength steal from 4 to 10, which I've seen has made him a monster. There's already been a couple threads on this on Reddit, and most people have said, don't build Ags first if you're going to go, you know, if you're going to go any lane, in fact. Go Crimson Guard, Vanguard, Mech, maybe even, Pipe, then go into Aghanim Scepter after that. So it makes him crazily, like, very strong. And it actually allows him to scale a little bit better into the late game. I think the biggest issue with Undying was that he didn't scale very well into the late game. Now he can scale a little bit better. So, and taking 10 strength away from an agility hero early on to the game, when you get Aghanim Scepter, if you do get it pretty early, is insane. Or even an intelligence hero. You take away some strength from an intelligence hero. See, imagine a CM at, like, you know, minute 20, you get an early Aghanim Scepter or something like that, and you get 2 decays off of her in a fight. That's 20 strength gone. Gone. Just gone from the CM. What's her start? Let's see her starting strength. Let's see Crystal Maiden's starting strength real quick. I guarantee you it's not going to be much. How much strength does she start with? Base starting strength is 16. So that's right there. And it's 1.7 gain per level. So let's just call it 2. And she's level 10 maybe at 20 minutes into the game. So you get 2 extra strength per level. Getting 20 strength. So you have 46 strength at minute 20, and all of a sudden you get decayed twice by an Aghanim Scepter Undying. You have 20 strength, half your hit points, or half your HP pool is gone. Just gone. Gone. Insane. Supports get wrecked by Undying with Aghanim Scepter. So that's the difference. Like, the thing is, they nerf one part of him, and they give him a really good buff on the other part of him, but you kind of can't get those early kills. You can't snowball. The problem with this is that because they changed the Tombstone, you can't snowball as heavily early on into the game. You can't get that early Aghanim Scepter if you wanted to get it. You have to kind of hopefully have some good team fights. That's tough with the change to Tombstone. So, bit of a nerf, bit of a buff. I still think he's good. Strength gain reduced. They actually nerfed Ursa hard for whatever reason. I have no idea why they nerfed him. All this stuff is nerfed. Except for Enrage cooldown. But they nerfed him. I guess that he's kind of a pop stomper. It's weird. I don't know. Very strange why they nerfed him. Still probably fine. The biggest thing is, if you guys are going to play jungle Ursa, especially in my games, please buy Blink Dagger after you have, you know, Phase, Vlad's. Maybe get a BKB first. But get freaking a Blink. Alright, I can't tell you how many times I've seen an Ursa get kited in my games because they don't go Blink first, because they're fucking retards, man. They're fucking retards. Moving on to Vengeful Spirit, agility and gain increase from 2.8 to 3.3. You know, right-click Venge is not much of a thing. You know, you'll occasionally see it in a competitive game. You'll occasionally see it in a pub. But it does allow her to hit harder later on down the road as a support, and I think that's fine. 5 extra move speed is not bad either. I can dig it. Venomancer poison sting damage increased by a little bit. Pretty good, actually. It's a lot of damage at max level. 24 damage is nothing to scoff at. Now works normally on illusions. Poison Nova damage per second reduced. This is without Ags. It's only been reduced by 1 at its max level, so it's not a huge deal. But it's been increased when you have Aghanim Scepter by 2. And you're going to get Ags on this hero anyways, in almost every situation. Even if you're a core Venom, you're still going to get an Aghanim Scepter because it's just too good. And the duration has been increased to 16 at all levels. Wait, what? What the hell? Poison Nova duration increased 12, 14. Why are there 4 levels? That's strange. Duration is longer increased by Aghanim Scepter. Alright, well, that's fine. They buffed it in another way. So this is actually really level 3. It's more of a buff than anything else, right? Because you have Poison Over for a longer duration with only 1 damage missing per tick. Pretty good. It's pretty good. So Venomet's a pretty good buff. Might make him more viable now. I don't know, you know, if you still pick him, he's still not a tier 1 support, but he's fine. Viper's agility growth has been increased, not by much, to 2.9, almost to 3, which makes him it actually makes him almost good in the later stage of the game. You know, 3. I think for any agility carry to be effective in the late game, I think his agility gain needs to be probably 3 at the very least. Which is why we see Vipers fall off a lot. I think his agility gain is not that great. Still 2.9 is fine. And Corrosive Skin, slow no longer pierces spell immunity, and that probably should have been how it worked in the first place. Who cares? Quality of life improvement. This is kind of big. How are you supposed to get rid of golems? You have to right-click them down now. And that's not really viable if you have 4 of them there. You know, if you have Ag's Refresher and somehow you get to that point as a core Warlock, which probably won't happen, you know, how are you going to kill him? Even, you know, early on in the game, people tend to not focus down the golem in the first place, so Warlock might actually be picked now. Not really, actually. Whatever. Who cares? Winter's Curse no longer affects spell immune enemies in the area, but it still affects the primary target. That's probably how it should have been. So they kind of nerfed Winter Wyvern a little bit, but he's still really good. Death Ward damage increased, which is crazy to me. I don't know what Death Ward no longer bounces once at level 3 means. I guess it bounced to another hero at its 3rd level. I didn't even know it did that, honestly. And you're going to get an Aghanim Scepter anyways. Witch Doctor got buffed. Sorry, Zelroth. He'll be great. Warlock will be great. Wraith King. Unless you're talking about Weaver. And I really don't care about him. Wraith King base damage increased by 7. Very good in lane now. Vampiric Aura does not show the healing effect if Wraith King is in the Fog of War. Who cares? Reincarnation Aghanim Scepter allied death delay increased from 5 to 7 seconds. Just whatever. And Reincarnation Aghanim Scepter ally Wraith Hour now remains active during reincarnation. Which I don't really care. No one builds this item. It's not great. Don't build it in my fucking game. But base damage increased by 7 is fine. I mean, it makes him a bit better early game, which is where he should be good, as, you know, he's a strength carry, so let's move on to the items. I think this is, I kind of, over the course of this video, I kind of changed my tune on this patch, and I'll tell you why after this, these items. Aegis now temporarily provides vision when you're respawning. Cool. Fine. No worries. Bloodstone has been nerfed. Respawn time reduction reduced from 4 per charge to 3 per charge. Bloodstone no longer reduces gold lost on death, which I didn't even know it did that in the first place, but now I know. It doesn't do it anymore. And it no longer grants vision / experience where its owner died. Oh well. But you have to think of it another way. Bloodstone in combination with the Storm nerf actually kind of really just, it almost ruins that hero, and it almost ruins Lich as well. Like, these changes might not seem huge, but you combine it with the nerfs that Lich and Storm received, both are Bloodstone carriers, it kind of hurts them a lot. Like, a lot. So, you know, it sucks. There are other heroes that Bloodstone's still fine on, and I'm not saying that Bloodstone's not fine on Lich and Storm, but just it nerfs them more. Bottle change is very slight. I think this is fine. It always felt like the ratio of health to mana restoration was too high for me anyways, so this change is okay. Recipe has been reduced for Crimson Guard, how it should have been, because the item for the utility that you get, I think the cost is too much. This is fine too. Purge cooldown reduced from 8 to 0. I'm only concerned that people in my game will spam it too much. Maybe they'll use it 3 times to try to kill one hero, which I think is really bad. It's a good way to get, you know, to go through charges very quickly. The active buff of Drum now has 25 bonus attack speed. So make a little bit of difference in a team fight, but other than that, not really. And you only really pop Drum to either get away or to try to chase after somebody. So you have to be very, I think, you have to be pretty, that's not 100% true. I think if you're smart, you'll be able to actually use endurance, the endurance charge pretty smartly. Finally, they reduced Dust cooldown. That cooldown was horrendous, and I'm glad they changed it. And Shit Mako has been more cost effective now, at 125, and the cast range has increased. I don't care about Ethereal Blade because that item is built on like 2 heroes. Eul Scepter, this is a pretty big nerf. you know, that's a decent range. Go on by the wayside. That'll really help certain people get away from mules. Guardian Greaves men cooldown reduced, which is nice. Glimmer Cape has been buff. No, wait. Fade time now increased by 0.2. Is now purgeable, and magic resistance has been reduced. Cast range has been reduced. Mana cost has been reduced. So this is actually a buff. But every other part of this is a nerf. And they're all small nerfs, but together, they make some pretty big nerf. Like, they make it one big nerf, kind of. So it's not like you're not going to bite the item anymore, but it's not going to be as strong as it once was. They made Heart a little more viable. It's still going to be built. You know, Heaven's Halberd can now be disassembled. I don't really... I mean, you could probably go Halberd plus, you know... well, the problem is you're not going to go what? You're not going to go Halberd and Manta. And then, what, change it into an SNY? No. I mean, there's no real reason to disassemble a Halberd. Maybe you get a Yasha and then you get a Halberd and then you build it into an SNY later, but... and then get like a Butterfly or a Solar Crest after. I guess it's fine. I guess it's okay. Helm of the Dominator now sets the Dominator's unit health at minimum of 1400. Who cares? Iron Will cost reduced to 900. That's pretty nice. Lotus Orb got a bit of a buff. That's okay. Not a particularly fantastic item still. Buffed Manta, which is interesting. They're doing a lot of really good agility buffs, which is nice. Medallion of Courage can no longer target spell immune enemies, which I think sucks. They really nerfed Medallion and Solar Crest hard, especially because it reduces armor values by half against Roshan. I don't know if these nerfs were warranted. I actually liked where Medallion and Solar Crest were, in my opinion. Maybe you could argue Solar Crest was too strong, but I really think Medallion was fine where it was. Mjolnir Chain Lightning target count increased from 8 to 12. Moonshard no longer requires a recipe. Yeah, that item was too expensive for sure. It was way too expensive. It still is too expensive, I think. Necronomicon, Warrior and Archer health increased. Whatever. This should have been the way it was. That should have been how it is. Get a lot more phase speed. But the duration's decreased by a good second. Still fine. Still good. Phase boot's always good. Treads has been nerfed by 5 for attack speed. That kind of sucks, but whatever. Not a big deal. Doesn't matter. Still expensive. Good buff. 5 seconds. And another quality of life support buff. Ring of Health has been, the cost has been reduced by 25, so is the Void Stone, and Veil has been, so Veil has actually been buffed a couple of ways in terms of recipe and how much it costs. The Helm of Iron Will has been buffed in the sense that it costs 50 less, and then the Veil recipe costs a little bit less. So Veil could be purchased earlier now, and I think that's really important because in pub games, especially, a lot of people don't know how to farm effectively, especially on support, even like on a Sand King or an Earthshaker. People don't know how to farm all those heroes in 2-3K games. So this helps people out, and this kind of ties into my theory about this patch. This is actually a really good pub patch, and here's why. They nerfed all of the really strong heroes in a way that, if you're not particularly good at the game, if you don't know how to exploit those particular good parts of a hero to their fullest extent, you're not going to be able to get the fullest out of a hero, and you're not going to be able to pub stomp as hard like you could with a Bloodseeker in the last patch, like you could with a Leshrac in the last patch. So this makes it easier for pub players. And in another way also, they buffed the hero pool by nerfing those other heroes and buffing a couple of other heroes so that you can pick a Venomancer now and I won't fucking yell at you. You can pick a Bat Rider now and I won't fucking yell at you. You can pick an Ancient Apparition now and I won't fucking yell at you. You can pick all these other heroes. You can pick a Chen now and I won't fucking scream my head off if it's you. But I'll expect you to know how to play the hero. And in doing so, they've buffed a lot of support stuff. So if you are picking these heroes, I'll be pretty happy because I won't have to play support. You'll be fucking playing support, and the support will be better so that you retards will actually know what the fuck to do. And I can play my carries and be happy about it. So this helps a lot of people, and even helps me for when I support as well because I'm not the best player. And I'm playing with 5K, 4K players. It'll help me actually be good at the game. And they buffed items as well, like a lot of support items. TP Scroll, Dust, Phase, Veil. All of these items that are support heavy are now able to be useful for you. So it's a support patch for sure. They definitely buffed a lot of supports this patch. It's less about the carries and cores and things like that, and more about quality of life support buffs. And that makes it a lot easier for me to not fucking yell at you people when you're playing Dota with me. I'm still going to yell at you though. Mott-bodied. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That is 6.85 in a nutshell. Nothing too flashy, nothing too crazy. Terrorblade is about as crazy as it gets, but as far as it's concerned, 6.84, it's not a crazy patch like those other patches were. So that's it for how 6.5 pertains to people in the 4K and below ranking. I appreciate you guys for joining me. I know there's a lot of you here. I probably got it Zelroth, but I'm sure I don't have my Twitch alerts on. I do appreciate it, and as always, I wish you had a Costco nearby me. Let's see, who can we go ahead and post? All right, guys, I will see you all later. Have a good night.